This video covers Unit 3, Lesson 23, the Mini Project Flyer Game. So let's start here with the overview page. So on the overview page, you are going to create this project called the Flyer Game. You're going to use conditionals, those are the if statements, to react to keyboard input or changes in variables and properties. You are also going to know how to sequence your commands to draw in the proper order. And then also you will be applying an iterator pattern to variables or properties in a loop. Make sure that you read through all the content and materials and that you do your activities and the assignment. Let's go to the next page. This just again goes through that you've been learning about user input, how to make the sprites move, the collisions, and then other complex sprite movements. So now you're going to complete a Flyer Game mini project. Feel free to return to any previous lesson if you need a coding refresher. Here is the assignment page. So for this project, you'll be completing an interactive Flyer Game using all the programming techniques that you have learned up to this point. In the Flyer Game, you're going to have a player, which is a flybot. You're going to have two obstacles, which are both rocks, and a coin. The player tries to avoid the obstacles, and while also they must avoid falling off the screen or the game is over. So there are 8 levels to this project in code.org. You have your level 1 that you're going to see an example. Level 2 is when you start making your sprites, and then levels 3 to 5 is the player controls, and then level 6 is sprite movement, and then level 7 is sprite interactions, and then level 8 is review your game. So when you get to level 8, that's when you're going to do the share button and get your link and submit it. Let's go ahead and make a copy of the lesson page, the assignment. So here you can see you only have to submit level 8, the share link from level 8. Let's go to code.org. Here we are, code.org, lesson 23, mini project Flyer Game. This is level 1. So in level 1 is an example. So let's go ahead and run it. You're trying to keep the player. You're going to use the keys, the arrow keys, to try to keep the player from falling off the screen. So let's run this. So you can see I have to try to keep my player off the screen or the game is over. And you can see there was the 2 rocks and there was also the coin. So you're going to be recreating this game. Go to level 2. So on level 2, you're going to recreate this game one thing at a time. So this is one entire project. You can see up to the upper right what they want you to do here. They want you to first create your sprites, and all those sprites are already set up for you. If you want to use different sprites, you can, but those are already set up for you in the animation tab. So you can see that they're already here and available. So I'm going to suggest that you go ahead and just use those ones, but if you want to, you can change them. So the player is the flybot or the flyer, and then the target is the coin, and then there's 2 obstacles. Those are the rocks. It's where it says do this. Go to the animation tab, make sure that you have the images that you want. We already checked that. Then it says find the code comment game setup. Create 3 more sprites, the target, and the 2 obstacles. Set each sprite to the animation you choose for it, and scale each one if you want. You don't have to do the scale. And then you need to place them to be on the screen or off the screen. And some of them need to be placed. You don't have to do any of the random stuff yet because that's later on. So we just want you to place them on the screen. And you also need to get them moving. The 2 rocks need to be moving in their X, and then one is Y velocity. Right? So when you test your program, you should see all 4 characters up there, and the 2 rocks should be moving. And that's it. So let's look at this and let's go to the game setup. So here we go down, and everything, they've kind of given you all these comments. So here's where the falling, the looping. So you're going to fill these in as you go through. But we need to find the game setup, which is right here. So they've already created for you. If you run, you can see that the flybot is already there, the player. So now, using the information here, you need to add in the coin and the rocks. So I'll give you a hint. You don't necessarily, I wouldn't set the scale for the 2 rocks and the coin. I would just leave their scale as is. So obviously you're just going to go and you're going to start adding in, and if we call that rock 1, and then you've got to set your animation and make sure you're naming these right, and then choosing your animation. Okay, and then you got to create the next rock, and then you got to create your coin. So just follow that same procedure that I just showed you. Then you need to place them, because if I run and reset this, my rock and my flybot are about the same place. So then I need to look at that drawing up in the upper right, and I know that I got to have a rock somewhere up here, and then I need a rock also coming across the screen on the left-hand side. So I would want to place this rock, if this is my first rock and I really need it to be over here, I'd get my grid and I say I really want my rock to be here. And I said, well, that's about 0 and 100. So I might change this and go 0 and 100. So I'm just kind of showing you how you'd place those, and you see there's my rock. Then when you make rock 2, you want to place that somewhere up here. So just put your pointer up there and then look at right below where it says show grid. It'll tell you what the X and the Y numbers are for that. So you need to finish that up and set up the other 2, rock number 2 and your coin. So you need to create the animation and then set the animation and then make sure place them where you want on the screen. And then the last thing you need to do is get those started. So how do we get those started? Just remember, you got to do the velocity. So if this one is on the X, and that's rock number 2, I just need to put a velocity, drag that down. So I'm giving you guys a little head start here. We're rock 1, and I can say, well, I want it to move 2. Oops. Rock 1, and I got to click over here and put 2. So if I reset and run that, you can see that my rock now is moving. Okay, so do that for rock number 2, and the coin doesn't need to move because it's stationary at this point. So once you have all that working and running, then go to level 3. And now at level 3, you are going to add velocity and the counter pattern here, because now you need to have your flybot falling. Okay, so you should have your 2 rocks moving, and now you've got to go to falling. So it says use the counter, go to falling, use the counter pattern with velocity Y to make it fly, to make the flyer fall. So here's falling. So all you need to do is just put the counter pattern in there with velocity Y. So you want to put the velocity Y first, just to kind of give you a hint. Then you're going to add your counter pattern in there. Okay, and make sure you rename this to be the flybot or the player. Actually, the player is the flybot, so make sure you rename this to player, and then you're going to put your counter pattern in there. If you don't remember how to do the counter pattern, then you need to go back and review. So if this is working and you've coded it correctly, you're going to see the flybot actually fall, right? And then when you're done with that, go to level 4. On level 4, you need to have that flybot jumping. So you see over to the example, you should be able to push the up arrow and have that flybot moving. So it wants you to go to the player controls, which is down here, and it says change the Y velocity when the user clicks up. So if you think about that, well, how am I going to do that? So you got to think about user input. When you did the keyboard input, what did you do when you did keyboard input, right? So if we think about that, that's an if statement. So you're going to be placing that statement in, and then you got to think about the key code, right? So grab your key code, and then it's got to be up. And then inside of here on line 23, that's where you're going to put your velocity y with your counter pattern, so that when the up button is pushed, the Flybot is going to go up like you see in the picture. So line 22 is where you're going to put your key code in there and then choose up, and line 23 is where you're going to start your counter pattern with velocity y and so forth. Okay, so you've got your velocity y, and then on this right side you put that counter pattern of sprite velocity y minus or plus something. Since it's going up, is that a negative or is that positive to make that character move up? You got to look at the grid. Okay, so you need to do that. And this is just, and once you've got this where the up arrow works and it moves the Flybot up, then you're done with level 4 and go to level 5. So I'm just giving you little hints to get you on the right track. So this one, now you want it to be able to float left and right. So you just did the up. Now you want to do add a conditional that decreases the sprite's x velocity when the left arrow is pushed. Add a conditional that increases the sprite's x velocity when the right arrow is pushed. Okay, so a hint, you got to use that velocity x block and the counter pattern again. So if we go right here, and again, these are if statements. So if, okay, and then here's another if. So those are the two you need to finish. And remember, you need to have the left arrow and the right arrow. So just kind of refreshing here. Key down, you're going to use the key downs in there, right? And then you've got to figure out what goes in here. Hint, counter pattern, velocity plus counter pattern, velocity and the counter pattern. Okay. Once you've got that, where you can see where the Flybot is able to move left and right and up, you've already got the up, then go to level 6. And in level 6, this is looping. So in other words, look at the example they have here to the upper right. Those rocks, when they go off the page, they actually loop and come back on the page. So you've learned about looping previously. If you need to go back and refresh your memory on how to create a loop, that is fine. You can do that. But in this one, you want them to randomly appear back at a different position on the opposite side. So you can see when it falls, when the rock that falls and hits the bottom, then it comes randomly back up to the top and starts somewhere else. The one that's moving left to right, once it goes off the right side, it randomly appears on the left side again and goes and keeps going in a loop. So we need to find the loop, and it's right here. And in that loop, it says add a conditional. So we know immediately that's an if statement, right? So I'll just kind of give you a hint where you're going to start. And then you need to write something in there that checks the obstacles, that checks its X property to see whether it's moved off the screen. So that's, you've done this before to check whether it's moved off the screen. So we need to use math, right? So I'll just kind of give you a little hint on this first one. So I want to check the rock. So I want to check its X where it is on X. So if this is rock 1, just to kind of give you an idea here and refresh your memory, then I say when rock 1, and that's the one that's moving left to right, when it reaches what number, think about your grid. Your grid is 400 by 400. So when it reaches X equals 400, I have my cursor over there, then something's going to happen. So I would use 400, and then I would bring in, I'm just going to give you a hint here, I'm going to reset its X position and reset its Y position, because I don't want it to appear at the same Y when it comes back over to the left. I don't want it to appear at the same Y every time. Okay, so you're going to put a number in here just to kind of give you guys some idea here. And so from here, you're going to set some number here that takes it back to the left side. So again, look at your grid. What X number would you use for it to come from that left side to appear from the left side and move right? And then for this one, you're going to use, give you a hint, you're going to randomly place it on the Y. So that's the up and down. So you're definitely going to use random number over here. Okay, so that's just kind of give you some type of hint, and then you're going to have to do that for rock number 2 also to make it loop. But you've got to figure out the rest of this. When you have that done and it looks like the picture up here to the upper right, then go to level 7. So this is a sprite interaction. So when your character, the Flybot, the player, when he touches the coin should move somewhere else on the screen. So you can see that in the example here. When the Flybot touches it, it moves to another area of the screen. So it says find the code comment sprite interactions and read the comments in that section. Okay, so we come down to sprite interactions down here, and it says read the comments. Reset the coin when the player touches it. Make the obstacles push the player. So you need to create a conditional that checks whether the player is touching the target and moves the target to a random position. So a conditional again, remember it's the if statement, so you're going to drag that in on line 42. Then it says create 2 new collisions that make the obstacles, so the obstacles are the rocks. So if the rocks, you can see when the player, on this example here, when the rocks touch the player, they move the player. So displacement, collision, remember those? Right here. You got bounce, bounce off, collide, displace, displace maybe. So you might be using those. Okay, so it's when the rock, remember when the rock touches the player, you want it to be able to move it. Okay, so there's one thing here you have to do to reset the coin and put it somewhere else randomly. And then under make the obstacles push the player, you're going to have at least 2 pieces of code there to make those obstacles, the rock 1 and rock 2, push the player off. When you're done with that, then go to level 8. And you need to test your game over and over and over again to make sure it's working. Once you get to level 8, if everything is working, then this is where you would click the share button, copy it, and then paste it onto your assignment page. And that's all you need to do for the Lesson 23 Mini Project Flyer game. If you need to go back and review other lessons, then do so. Plus here are the helps and tips.